Amelia stepped into her apartment, the familiar click of the key in the lock echoing in the quiet hallway. She wheeled her suitcase inside and closed the door behind her. As she headed towards the living room, the soft sound of running water from the bathroom stopped her in her tracks. Her brow furrowed. Her mother? Impossible, she had a shower at her own place. Her father? Even less likely. A burglar? Amelia's eyes scanned the kitchen. There, leaning against the wall, was the rolling pin her mother had left after making dumplings. Perfect. Gripping the rolling pin, she marched towards the bathroom door. Her heart pounded as she reached for the handle, took a deep breath, and the door swung open, revealing a sight that stole her breath away. The man who had haunted her dreams stood before her, radiating an undeniable charisma. His eyes, like the brightest stars in the night sky, held a gentle yet intense gaze. His skin, smooth as polished jade, seemed to glow with an inner light. Amelia stood frozen, as if the world had stopped spinning. Only the two of them existed, framed by the softly lit doorway. Her heart began to race again, but this time with a different rhythm, a powerful, exhilarating beat that spoke of a nameless joy and anticipation. Daniel, wrapped in a towel, was drying his hair. He froze, startled by the woman's sudden appearance. Recovering quickly, he frowned, lowered the towel, and stared at her for a beat. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and magnetic. The sound sent a shiver down Amelia's spine, momentarily erasing her purpose. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Are you mute?" he asked, his voice still laced with indifference. Amelia snapped out of her trance, rolling her eyes. "Mute? You're the one who's mute," she thought. But his undeniable attractiveness softened her annoyance. "What's your name?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. "Are you from the agency?" Amelia stammered, caught off guard. 3 seconds. "Get out," Daniel said curtly, turning towards the bedroom. So much for charm, Amelia thought, following him. "Excuse me, who are you, and what are you doing in my apartment?" He stopped at the bedroom door and turned back, surprise etched on his face. "Your apartment?" "Yes, my apartment." Daniel gave her a long look, walked to the living room, picked up the phone from the coffee table, and dialed a number. "You double-booked the apartment." Amelia froze. "Double-booked? How was that possible?" Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. Amelia opened the door to find her mother and a stranger standing outside. Her mother glared at her. "You silly girl. Didn't you get my message? The apartment is rented." "What are you doing here?" "Rented? Mom, this is my apartment." "Your apartment? Your father and I bought this place. Until you're married, it's still mine to decide what happens to it." Amelia was speechless. The stranger, she guessed, was the real estate agent. He hurried past them into the living room, apologizing profusely to Daniel, who was now dressed in casual clothes. "Mr. Stone, I am so sorry. This is a misunderstanding. Please accept our apologies." "Mr. Stone, I'm so sorry," her mother chimed in, her forced laughter doing little to ease the tension. "My daughter is a bit scatterbrained. Don't mind her. I'll give her a good talking to when we get home." Daniel lit a cigarette, taking a long drag. He glanced at Amelia, still standing awkwardly by the door, his expression impassive. "Do you need me to recommend a doctor?" The question hung in the air, each person's reaction a shifting mask of emotions. "Oh, Mr. Stone, you have such a sense of humor," her mother chuckled nervously. "My daughter is actually very hardworking. How about she comes over and cleans your apartment? Free of charge, of course." "Mom," Amelia protested. Her mother silenced her with a sharp look. This young man was handsome and successful, a perfect match for her daughter. Becoming his mother-in-law would be a dream come true. And even if that didn't happen, he was paying double the market rent. Amelia felt a jolt, as if struck by lightning. He agreed, without a word of protest, to her mother's outrageous suggestion. She would be his housekeeper. The agent and her mother left, their faces beaming, leaving Amelia standing there, bewildered. "Clean the bathroom," Daniel instructed. "The floor and the cabinets are covered in dust." He then disappeared into the study. Amelia frowned. He was treating her like a servant. Well, she had her mother to thank for this. They were both suckers for a pretty face, and it seemed her mother had fallen under Daniel's spell as well. She even trusted him alone with her daughter, apparently unconcerned about any unforeseen consequences. But would she refuse if he made a move? A blush crept up her cheeks at the thought. She shook her head. "Amelia, you're going to lose your mind over this guy," she muttered to herself. She glanced at the closed study door, then turned and headed for the bathroom. Amelia buzzed around the apartment like a busy bee, transforming every room except the study into a spotless haven. She paused outside the study door, listening. Silence. She raised her hand to knock, but the door suddenly opened. Daniel stood before her. Amelia stepped back, forcing a smile. "Mr. Stone, can I clean the study now?" He glanced at her and said, "Make me a coffee." Then he turned and walked back inside. Amelia stood there for a moment, sticking her tongue out at his retreating back, before heading to the kitchen. 15 minutes later, she returned with the coffee, placing it on his desk with a saccharine smile. "Mr. Stone, your coffee." Daniel, engrossed in his work, didn't even look up. Amelia rolled her eyes and resumed her cleaning duties. He was a pediatrician, currently absorbed in a complex case involving a child with a congenital disease. After a while, a small, pale hand appeared in his field of vision, waving back and forth. He looked up, his eyes meeting those of the hand's owner. "Excuse me, Mr. Stone," Amelia said hesitantly. "I've cleaned everything but your desk." She felt a flicker of unease, as if gazing into uncharted waters. Daniel remained silent, his dark eyes fixed on her, drawing her in. "It'll only take a few minutes." He continued to watch her without speaking, the silence making her uncomfortable. Amelia took a deep breath and began tidying his desk. Finally, he spoke. "Can you cook?" Amelia paused, then nodded. "You're done here. Go make dinner," he said, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "Okay." Amelia went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Empty. Half an hour later, she returned from the supermarket, laden with groceries, and disappeared into the kitchen. As she placed the last dish on the table, Daniel emerged from the study, holding a piece of paper and a pen. "Sign this," he said, placing it on the table. Amelia looked down. It was an employment contract. She looked up at him, bewildered. "You'll come over every weekend to clean, and also cook occasionally. I'll pay you a salary. This is the contract. Any questions?" Amelia blinked, processing his words. "Mr. Stone, I can't meet your demands. Perhaps you should get a girlfriend. She could fulfill both your domestic and emotional needs." Daniel frowned. "Is the salary not enough?" "Mr. Stone, I have a job." He looked surprised. "You have a job?" "Yes." "Since dinner is ready, you can leave." Amelia opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. She had been completely taken in by his looks. "Something else?" Daniel asked, impatience creeping into his voice. Amelia bit her lip. She'd spent the entire day cleaning and cooking, and now she wouldn't even get to eat the meal she'd prepared. She glared at his back and turned to leave. Amelia entered her own apartment, fuming. So he's handsome, big deal. With that icy demeanor, no woman would want him. He can stay single forever, she muttered. "What are you mumbling about?" her mother asked, emerging from the kitchen with a plate of food. Amelia looked up. "Mom, haven't you eaten yet?" I couldn't eat until my daughter came home, her mother said, poking her forehead affectionately. Love you, Mom. Amelia smiled, taking the plate. So, how is Mr. Stone? He's an ice king. Totally arrogant, she grumbled. He seems nice. Good job, too. Why don't you give him a try? Try what? Amelia asked, sitting down at the table. A relationship, her mother said, sitting opposite her. Mom, do you even know him? And how do you know he's even single? Well, he's handsome and he has a good job. I just want the best for my daughter. Amelia sighed. Her mother was desperate to marry her off. I saw his ID. He's from here, a professor at the children's hospital. Such a young professor, and a pediatrician. He must be a good person. Mom, that's not how it works. Well, your father and I didn't know each other before we started dating. I fell for him because he chased me down in the snow to return my lost wallet. Mom, that was a different time. People were more innocent then. Nowadays, everyone has ulterior motives. But you admit he's handsome? Yes. And you like him? Amelia nodded. Then go for it. But what if he's just using his looks to trick girls? He wouldn't dare. He saw the pictures of your brother and father in their police uniforms when he came to sign the lease. But you put those away. How could he have seen them? I put them out on purpose, her mother said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Mom, were you planning on making him your son-in-law before you even rented him the apartment? Of course. You're not getting any younger, and you're still single. Amelia was speechless. 2 weeks later, Amelia's mother went to stay with her father, who was living with her brother's family, to help with his grandson. Amelia was now alone in her apartment. The next morning, as she was leaving for work, Daniel emerged from his apartment across the hall. He glanced at her, locked his door, and headed for the elevator. Amelia stood there, stunned. The elevator dinged, and she hurried inside, standing behind him. The enclosed space amplified the silence. She stole a glance at him and blurted out, "Mr. Stone, are you settling in okay?" He didn't reply. The elevator reached the ground floor, and Amelia, feeling awkward and embarrassed, vowed to ignore him from now on. Fate, however, had other plans. Later that morning, one of her students collapsed at school. As the child's teacher, Amelia accompanied him to the hospital, where she found Daniel, the attending physician. Amelia waited anxiously outside the emergency room. The child's parents were divorced, and his elderly grandmother hadn't arrived yet. After over an hour, Daniel emerged. He frowned when he saw Amelia. "What are you feeding these children? Cold food?" "That's impossible," Amelia replied. "Our school would never give children cold food." She'd been a teacher there for 3 years and knew how much the principal cared about the children's well-being. Daniel's frown deepened. "Impossible?" "This child is in shock due to a severe stomach upset." Amelia was taken aback, but she still trusted the school. "Dr. Stone, how is Michael doing?" she asked anxiously. "He's severely malnourished," Daniel said gravely. Amelia was shocked. "That's not possible. He's always been healthy." Daniel fixed her with a hard stare. "As his teacher, shouldn't you be aware of his health? He's always energetic and happy at school. He eats well." Amelia trailed off. Some children had breakfast and dinner at home, under the care of different teachers. Amelia only oversaw lunch. "It seems you're not a very responsible teacher," Daniel said coldly, walking away. Amelia stood there, speechless. A nurse wheeled Michael out of the emergency room. Amelia rushed to his side. "Michael." The boy opened his eyes, tears streaming down his pale face. "Teacher, I'm sorry." Amelia's eyes welled up. "Where does it hurt? Tell me." Michael shook his head, his eyes searching the room before dropping to his lap. Michael, your grandma is on her way, Amelia said softly, stroking his cheek. Where are Mommy and Daddy? He whispered. Amelia didn't know how to answer. You're Michael, right? Daniel's voice came from behind her. Amelia turned to find him standing there. Michael nodded. Michael, you're a little man, and little men don't make their parents worry. A look of understanding dawned on Michael's face, and a small smile appeared. Doctor, I'm a little man. I won't worry Mommy and Daddy. Good boy, Daniel said, a faint smile touching his lips. You can smile. Amelia exclaimed, surprised. Daniel gave her a cold look. Go admit him. After completing the paperwork, Amelia returned to Michael's room and read him stories until he drifted off to sleep. It was almost evening. Amelia checked her phone, no missed calls. Michael's grandmother still hadn't arrived. She watched the sleeping boy. Her heart filled with a deep sense of compassion. Exhausted, she eventually fell asleep, her head resting on the edge of Michael's bed. When Daniel arrived after his shift, he found Amelia asleep. The soft light illuminated her face, giving her a warm glow. He draped his coat over her, sat down in a nearby chair, and pulled out his phone. Amelia dreamt of a table laden with delicious food. She reached for a steaming dish, just as a voice called her name. Don't bother me, she mumbled. I'm eating. Amelia, wake up. She opened her eyes to find Daniel's face inches from hers. She stared at him for a moment, then sat up abruptly. What are you doing here? Daniel was silent, his gaze fixed on her flushed face and the trace of drool on her chin. Finally, he spoke. Michael is hungry. Oh. I'll order takeout. She reached for her phone. He just had surgery. You want to feed him takeout? What should he eat then? She asked, bewildered. Porridge. I'll order some porridge. Amelia, have you ever taken care of a sick person? Amelia looked up at him, his brow furrowed in disapproval. You said porridge. What's wrong with ordering porridge? Maybe I should refer you to a neurologist, he said dryly. Teacher, the doctor said I can't have takeout, Michael said weakly. Amelia rolled her eyes. Why couldn't he just tell her to go home and make it? She stood up, looking directly at Daniel. Then if you'll excuse me, Dr. Stone, I'll go home and prepare a suitable meal. Daniel took out his keys and held them out to her. Go to my place. The keys seemed to radiate a warmth, a gesture that was both an invitation and a command. Amelia froze, her heart pounding. Seeing her hesitation, Daniel clarified, Your mother asked you to clean my apartment. You can skip the cleaning today and just cook. Amelia's hopes deflated. He still saw her as nothing more than a housekeeper. Yes, Dr. Stone, she said through gritted teeth. 2 hours later, as Amelia approached Michael's room with a thermos of porridge, she heard an elderly woman's voice. Michael's grandmother had finally arrived. Dr. Stone, thank you for taking care of my grandson. It's my job. Michael's teacher has been with him all day and has gone home to make him dinner. Ms. Carter is such a good teacher. She always looks after Michael at school, the grandmother said. Daniel's gaze flickered towards the doorway where Amelia stood, unseen. She's a teacher. It's her responsibility. Grandma, I'm hungry. Amelia entered the room. Ms. Carter. The grandmother hurried over, her face etched with gratitude and apology. Thank you for taking care of Michael. I'm so sorry I'm late. It's okay, Amelia replied. I should have been more attentive. After Michael finished eating, Amelia left the hospital. She noticed Daniel slipping an envelope under Michael's pillow. Money, she guessed. The gesture surprised her, and a strange warmth spread through her chest. Downstairs in the lobby, Amelia paced nervously. A few minutes later, Daniel emerged from the elevator, his hands in his pockets. He walked past her without a glance, as if she were invisible. Hey, stop. Amelia called out, following him. He kept walking. She caught up and grabbed his arm. Didn't you hear me calling you? Do you need something? Obviously. Why would I call you otherwise? What is it? Why did you give Michael's family money? You saw the money? Daniel asked, his eyes finally meeting hers. Amelia was speechless. Finally, she asked, do you hate me? Daniel met her gaze and nodded without hesitation. Why? He looked down at her. Do I need a reason? Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes. His kindness towards Michael had revealed a compassionate side she hadn't seen before. She had been drawn to this handsome, caring man, only to be met with his coldness. That's why she had to ask. Sorry to bother you, she whispered, turning to leave. Do you like me? His voice stopped her. She turned back, and he asked again, do you love me? Amelia hesitated. Was liking someone the same as loving them? My wife loved me very much. Amelia's mind reeled. He was married? My wife, she's gone. We lost our child in a car accident. I'm a doctor, but I couldn't save him. Daniel's eyes were filled with pain. Amelia felt a sharp pang of sympathy, a deep ache in her heart as if his grief were her own. Is she okay? She asked, her voice trembling. She's lost herself. Lost herself, Amelia repeated numbly, tears blurring her vision. She turned and fled. Daniel watched her go, then closed his eyes for a moment before running after her. Amelia raced home, bursting into her parents' bedroom. She frantically searched until she found a locked box at the bottom of the closet. She grabbed a hammer, smashed the lock, and pulled out the contents. Photographs stabbed at her heart. Medical records piled up like a mountain, crushing her with their weight. Then she saw it. A divorce decree. His name, Daniel Stone. Hers, Anna Carter. A scream tore from her throat. Daniel rushed in and pulled her into his arms. Anna. Anna. Tell me what happened, Amelia whispered, clutching his arms. 5 years ago, Amelia's best friend had been abused by her husband. Amelia, wanting to help her friend escape, had asked Daniel, her husband, for a medical report to document the injuries. That report had unforeseen consequences. Her friend successfully divorced her husband, but he blamed Amelia and harbored a deep resentment. Then the accident. Amelia had survived, but their son hadn't. Consumed by guilt and grief, she had forced Daniel to divorce her. She spiraled into a deep depression and attempted suicide. Her family brought her home, and she and Daniel had lived separate lives ever since. One act of kindness had shattered their world. Go away, she said quietly. I'm not Anna Carter anymore. I'm Amelia Carter, single and unmarried. Anna, let's start over. He loved her, he hated her. He'd tried to move on, to find someone to fill the void she had left, but no one could replace her. She owned his heart, even though she'd cost him everything. I don't deserve to be your wife. If he hadn't told her the truth, she might have fallen in love with him. They could have started over, had more children. But now, she couldn't be with him. Regret washed over Daniel. Why had he been so impulsive? If he hadn't told her, they might still have a chance. She had forgotten their past, but had opened her heart to another man, a man who, despite being himself, filled him with jealousy. He imagined her with another man, a life without him. The thought was unbearable, a knife twisting in his gut. Anna, this is cruel. You took our son from me. You owe me another one, he said, his voice thick with anger. Amelia froze. If you won't marry me, then give me a child. I'll leave you alone after that. It's the least you can do. Daniel, if you want a child, find another woman, she said calmly. Daniel grabbed her chin, his eyes cold. Then he kissed her, hard. Anna, this is what you owe me. A debt you can never repay. Tears streamed down her face as he continued to kiss her, his touch both tender and demanding. "Mom, I remember everything," Amelia said when her mother called. On the other end of the line, her mother gasped. "Anna." "Mom, thank you, and Dad, and everyone, for taking care of me. But I need to do this on my own now." "Anna, what happened? Don't scare me. I just want you to be happy. Daniel is in so much pain." "He." Amelia stared out the window. Their son was a chasm between them, a wound that might never heal. Since regaining her memory, she'd been haunted by dreams of their little boy, his happy face, his laughter, calling them mommy and daddy. She reached for him, but her hands always passed through him. In his office at the hospital, Daniel's friend, Mark, sat watching him work. "I heard you moved into your ex-mother-in-law's apartment," he corrected himself when Daniel looked up sharply. "Your current mother-in-law's. News travels fast. Just looking out for you. I don't understand you. You hate her, but you can't let her go. If your friend came to you, asking for help because she was being abused, would you help her?" Daniel asked, putting down his file. "Of course." Mark paused, then realization dawned on his face. "She's not to blame. It was that monster. Can she ever forgive you?" "Whether she forgives me or not, we're bound together forever." Mark gave him a thumbs up. "True love, huh?" Their child was both the knot that tied them together and the blade that had cut them apart. Daniel wanted another child, a new life, a way to bind them together again. Despite her resistance, Amelia became pregnant. The child brought a new light into her life. She poured all her love into her daughter. Life imitated art, and art imitated life. They became parents again, cautiously navigating their new reality. They avoided the past, focusing on the future, determined to create a happy home for their daughter. Slowly, the wounds began to heal. Perhaps, one day, they would truly be whole again. The end.